Welcome to Creative Writing Meetup in Altspace VR. We meet once a week at Altspace VR, which you can find more information and download it at altvr.com. It's in the Oculus Store. I think it's back on Google Play. So do check that out. We write in the real world, but we share in VR, and we'd love to have you join us on virtual reality. So we're doing a writing workshop that we do every other week in Altspace, along with prompts every other week. So we meet once a week. You can find more information and join our group at discord.me/writingvr. We'd love to have you join us, or you can head to altvr.com and check the events calendar and come join us. We're a creative support group for writers. So come join us and we cheer each other on. We write to prompts. We work on these different workshops, which this is one, so that we get to push ourselves and experiment and get our creativity going. Now, we write in the real world, as I said, not in VR. So during the event, we do write in we do a prompt in VR, and then we kind of ask you to pop your headset off or to push it up on your forehead and write in some way. We ask you to mute yourself and then do that writing and then come back in at the end of the prompt, which is 3 to 8 minutes or so usually. And then we share what we've written. And I do recommend you can come in the immersive 3D devices, but I also recommend that you experiment with coming in 2D, which Altspace allows. You can download it at altvr.com. So you come in through your laptop or your desktop. That gives you hands-free and easy typing. Just mute yourself and you can write easily. But I don't care how you get there, come join us. I do recommend that if you are on the Oculus Go or the Quest, that one of the problems we have is if you take your headset off, there's a sensor in the forehead, it turns off your device. So make sure you check the power settings so that you can set a timer, or you change the auto wake up and auto sleep so that it doesn't do that. Or you can go with the rough hack to put a little piece of black electrician's tape over that sensor in the forehead, and it doesn't do it. Just make sure you conserve battery by turning it off manually, and don't forget that tape's in there. In November is National Novel Writing Month. That's NaNoWriMo, where the goal is to write 30 days, 50,000 words, or 1,667 words a day on average. I also ask if people want to commit to doing this and that word count is intimidating. And this is not part of NaNoWriMo, this is just part of what I offer, to commit to writing a minimum of 1 hour a day. If you miss the 1 hour, or you only get half an hour, you add it to the next day so you can kind of keep that commitment for 30 hours for the whole month. If you want more information, go to nanowrimo.org. And I'll be talking about that more as we get closer to it. But do know that in November, we're going to have daily meetups. Every day we're going to meet in Altspace VR. And we're going to do prompts and writing sprints and check-ins. So come join us. It's going to be great. And I love doing this in VR. It's just fabulous. So the workshop today is finding the poetry in words. My husband and I have been rereading some short stories by O. Henry. Oh, go check them out. They're wonderful. But it inspired me to look at the creative aspect of that poetic license that we can use in writing as part of the craft of writing. So we had a great meeting where we talked about this, did some fantastic work with it, and I'm going to give you a brief summary of it. First of all, I looked up the definition of poetry. Now, I'm not talking about, poetry is not defined by groups of 4 or 6 stanzas and every other word must rhyme. The true definition of poetry is literature or artistic writing that attempts to stir the reader's imagination or emotions. Whew. See, that changes how I think about what does poetry mean. It doesn't mean it rhymes, doesn't mean it has to be a certain stanza. It's that artistic writing that stirs emotion and imagination. So today the workshop was designed to stir things up in people, and we had a fantastic group. I'm only going to mention just a few things that they talked about during the group, and I'm not going to read all of the different poetic things that we talked about. I'm just going to do excerpts. You can look most of these up because they're old writings, to really look at what happened. So y'all know this. We learned this a long time ago, this wonderful, wonderful poem about the Road Less Traveled by Robert Frost. So 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood. And sorry I could not travel both. And then it continues on, and it summarizes with, I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So we talked about what this meant emotionally. What does this stir up emotionally? And many people felt that it was about making choices in your life and choosing that path. But other people said that it made them feel a bit lost about challenges, about conflict, internal conflict and external conflict with people who wanted to tell you, were trying to dictate your way of life and you were choosing to deviate away from that, and the anxiety and frustration with facing that as a young person or even an older person. So it was interesting to see the mix of emotions that this famous poem brought up for so many people. And the next example is from Ozymandias. And what is really interesting about this is that it refers to this sculpture, so to speak, this giant, giant statue that has now broken apart and fallen down and is in pieces. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but here's the gist of what we were talking about. So I met a traveler from an ancient land who said, two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Then it continues. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command. Tell that its sculpture well those passions read, which yet survived, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on a pedestal these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my words, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. So we talked about what this meant, what it brought up for people about this great former gigantic statue that was made so long ago and now is just a ruin, just shattered there in a desert where nothing exists. And yet here this plaque proclaims that this is my great works, and there's nothing to see except sand. Wonderful. Think of the pyramids. Think about all the great things that, have been lost to time, and yet some element remains. So people said that they felt a great deal of loss, that they also felt the arrogance of the king to say, look at me, look what I have done, and yet how humbling that is, and futile, because that great kingdom that he built, whatever that looked like, is now sand. It's gone to dust, dust to dust. There's nothing left. So people were feeling a variety of different sad, conflicted, arrogancy, loss, and all those different emotions that were hitting them about, and small. Some people said they felt kind of small because time just shows you that no matter how arrogant you are and how controlling of your environment, nature kind of wins. So you're a little bit of a speck in the whole timeline of the earth and the planet and history. So that was really fascinating. And what a great example in contrast to the other examples. Now, in this particular example from O. Henry, in The Gift of the Magi, we kind of turned it from looking at the emotions that were stirred up to the emotional words that painted the picture, that triggered the imagination. And O. Henry is just fantastic about helping you, using words that just create visuals. $1.87, that was all. And 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved, 1 and 2 at a time, by bulldozing the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher until one's cheeks burned with the silent imputation of parsimony that such close dealings implied. 3 times Della counted it, $1.87. And the next day would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing to do about it but flop down on the shabby little couch and howl. So Della did it, which instigates the moral reflection that life is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles predominating. I just love that. So the story goes on, but look at what is painted. What are the words that jump out? The 67 cents of it was in pennies. I love that. That tells you how much work went into making sure that every penny worked. They were saved 1 or 2 at a time by bulldozing the grocer, vegetable man, butcher. We don't mean bulldozing like a giant machine was pushing them. That's not, they weren't working and running a bulldozer. This is a expression of negotiating and wheeling and dealing with these people to say, just okay, for this piece of meat, that's just, really, that's a lot of money for the meat. Let's negotiate that down just a few cents, saving just a little bit of money and wheeling and dealing with that. So bulldozing was just a wonderful world of trying to make every penny stretch and save as much as they could. I loved the expression, one's cheeks burned. He could have said red cheeks. Could have said, they flushed. But cheeks burned. There's anger behind that. I think that's wonderful. Then jumping ahead, we could talk a lot about this, but I love when it came down to the next day would be Christmas. Immediately you have conflict. It isn't just about the saving of the money and how hard that took. It was the next day is Christmas. So that's serious business. We immediately have some desperation that helps to paint the scene. I love the description of flop down on the shabby little couch and howl. In just those few words, combined with just that little bit of money, you know where Della lives. You see the living room that she's in. You see the room she's staying in. Your imagination can fill in those details of her life with shabby little couch. Love that. Then we have the great alliteration of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles predominating. Alliteration is the use of consonants in repeated patterns that are just plays in the words and add texture and light to them. And they're fun to say, and the reader, when they're reading, they're fun to read. Sobs, sniffles, and smiles. That's fun. It's like S sounds or dazzling days of delight. We love those things. You have to use them carefully. But look in just those few words, the emotional painting that is painted. Just love it. Now, in another story by O. Henry, it's one of his famous ones called The Furnished Room. We're going to look at a little different examples here and see what those emotional words are. So as I read this, really look at what's being painted and what's going on. Restless, shifting, fugacious as time itself is a certain vast bulk of the population of the red brick district of the Lower West Side. Homeless, they have 100 homes. They flit from furnished room to furnished room, transients forever, transients in abode, transients in heart and mind. They sing Home, Sweet Home in ragtime. They carry their lares et penates in a bandbox. Their vine is entwined about a pitcher hat. A rubber plant is their fig tree. Hence the houses of this district, having had 1,000 dwellers, should have 1,000 tales to tell, mostly dull ones, no doubt. But it would be strange if there could not be found a ghost or two in the wake of all these vagrant guests. Now, I probably mispronounced the Latin that's being used here, but just to let you know, lares et penates, if that's the correct pronunciation, I hope, is they're the Roman gods that were the household gods. So they're basically saying they're carrying their spirits in the bandbox. And the household gods, when you moved into a new place, you set up your little statues and your altar to the gods to make sure that your house would be protected. So he's saying your spiritual sense, but it's also a reference to the knickknacks that we carry about our lives. For example, when people move around, they have that picture of their family or a loved one that they carry with them, a little glass porcelain cat or a knickknack or whatever it happens to be, that a rock that has painting or carved in some word, whatever it is, that we just kind of feel comfortable when we have that. We feel like we're home when we put our little knickknacks out around us. No matter where we are, we have those little stuff that we carry with us to help define our life and to trigger memories. So that's what that's referring to. Now, I asked people to pull out the different words. And the first problem we have is that people thought that these were homeless people, as in the people living on the street, pushing their lives around in shopping carts or something. That is not what this is talking about. What this is talking about is people who lived in apartments, who are the transient workers, the migrant workers, if you want to use that as an example. These are the people that are brought to a place because that's where the job is. They may be from somewhere else that they call home. They may have a home base, but they're coming here because this is where the work is. And they may work for a month or 2 or 3, and then they move, maybe a year or 2, and then they move on to the next place. So they're talking about what we today call the apartments. So it's not a house you buy. It's just temporary housing while you're working or you're doing whatever it is, and then you move on to the next. So it's explained by the furnished room to furnished room. So these people don't even carry furniture. They're just moving and they got a bed, they got a room, it's a room or a little apartment kind of thing. And notice that you have the vine is entwined about a pitcher hat. I think that's wonderful. And a rubber tree is their fig tree, which means they're not even staying there long enough to build connections with people or be a part of a community. They're just there to do the job. They come home, they sleep, they just, go about their business, and they can't even make a connection with a living plant. They're not there long enough. So they have a rubber plastic plant that's a little bit of nature that they may carry around with them, to go, oh, well, here's a plastic plant. Okay, that's nature right in there. And I love having the houses having 1,000 dwellers and 1,000 tales, but most of them are dull. So it's setting up that we're about to be told a story about a place. And then there might be a ghost or two. So it's a good setup. It starts painting the picture, and it talks about that transient nature of life. The young tenant in the chair allowed these thoughts to file, soft shod through his mind, while there drifted into the room furnished sounds and furnished scents. He heard in one room a tittering and incontinent laughter. In others, the monologue of a scold, the rattling of dice, a lullaby, and one crying dully. Above him, a banjo tinkled with spirit. Doors banged somewhere. The elevated trains roared intermittently. A cat yowled miserably upon a back fence. And he breathed the breath of the house, a dank savor rather than a smell, a cold, musty elephium. I'm going to mess up that word. Eluvium, as from underground vaults, mingled with the reeking exhalations of linoleum and mildewed and rotten wood. Wow, that taps into all the different senses, doesn't it? Rattling dice, a lullaby, banjo tinkles, doors banging, the cat, mixed with the smell and this savory smell of underground vaults with linoleum, mildew, and rotten wood. You get a whole sense of what this building is without being told that maybe the walls are thin and the carpet's a little worn and maybe the little peeling wallpaper. You just get a feeling of history and all the people that live in this building. So our prompt was to take that concept of working just strictly with odor. I wanted to simplify this down. So I asked people to complete the sentence that came from O. Henry, and then we just modified it a little. The rich odor clung to him and wrapped around him. He reached out his arms for it, all his senses for the time confused and commingled. He smelled, and then you finish the sentence. So the prompt was he smelled. What did he smell? We had some great, great responses. And I'm going to let you do this prompt, and you can come join us in our Discord where you can share what that is. So thank you for joining us. Again, this is the Creative Writing Meetup. It happens in AltSpace once a week. Come drop by and put on some VR gear or come in 2D. We'd love to have you join us. We have prompts and all kinds of writing exercises to work with every week. You can join our Discord at discord.me/writingvr. We have some writing tips that are also at writersinthegrove.com. So which is just an ancillary site that has some great tips on writing and some fabulous prompts. So go check those out. All right. Thank you all for joining me, and I'll see you next week.